Today on Locked On White Sox, I welcome in Zach Hayes from South Side Sox, PitcherList, and Baseball Prospectus to talk about the 2022 White Sox. You can follow Zach at Pine Tar Keyboard. The audio could be better, which is my fault. I apologize for that. It will be fixed on Monday. I hope you enjoy. Here is Locked On Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Sox podcast. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. We're free and available on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and many more places at Locked On Sox. And you can find us by searching Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Sean Anderson, TGIF. It is Friday, February 25th, and today I have a guest. Bless up. Thank you. Our guest blessing up that it is a Friday. Zach Hayes, writing from South Side Sox, PitcherList, and Baseball Prospectus. And he had me on his podcast, so why not have him on my podcast? He is the co-host, not was, hopefully not. He is the co-host of the Shaggin Flies Podcast from PitcherList with Ben Palmer. You can go check out the episode I did with them. We talked music, we talked baseball, a long, nice conversation if you're looking for something over this weekend. But Zach, how are you, buddy?
Oh, I'm pretty nice. I'm very happy it's Friday. I'm very happy to be sharing the airwaves with you right now. Let's talk some White Sox.
Absolutely. And one thing I got to talk to you, because you're also the editor of Shaggin Flies. And I told this to you in the DMs, but you guys have the best bleep in the game. So, I mean, can you explain it for the Sox fans out there?
Mercy. Yeah, it's, we're not allowed to curse on our podcast, which doesn't actually stop us from cursing. But I'm just editing in Audacity. So rather than get a generic bleeper, I'm like, okay, let's get a little Sox fan representation on here. Got to drop plugs where I can. So I just took a little Hawk Harrelson mercy. And, every time a curse drops, which is pretty frequently, that's what you hear. I am also of the opinion it's the best bleeper in the game. There's no contest. And
if we slip up today in homage to your appearance today, I will also use it as my bleep because the shout out to Tegna, we're not allowed to swear either. So that's the fun part. But I'm glad you got creative with it. It makes listening to your podcast fun. But the first time it was jarring. I was like, where the hell did Hawk come from? So excited to talk to you today because you got a lot of great articles out. You have a very I love your take on the lockout, and I'd love to get your take on the commissioner office, and I'd love to get your take on the lockout. You also had a great article on the Pakoda projections for the Sox. But I want to start off with your hot take. You tweeted out yesterday and got some pretty good run on the Twitter sphere with your Dylan Cease take. For every Dylan Cease is the best, for every Dylan Cease is the 2020 breakout candidate article I see this offseason, I will take one shot on the day of his first start. Up to 3 so far, but if I black out, I'll still be by the 4th inning by the time I recover. So we're all good. So I had the take back in December that he can win the 2022 AL Cy Young. So, you're fishing for that. What's going on here?
No, I actually, it was a hot take on my end. And it's funny because I have been through most of last season. If you want to go back through my timeline, I was definitely on team Cease. I was not one of the people that was super upset with his inconsistency, but I think it is funny. It's mostly coming from the fantasy community and that side of things. It's funny to see these articles and people giving these takes where they're kind of expecting Cease to make this jump into like, this might be the guy who becomes a top 10, top 15 pitcher. Our opinions being White Sox fans and being people who are pretty dedicated to watching the team day in, day out, are coming from a slightly different place. What gets me is when it's clearly people who are seeing his astronomical strikeout totals, going to his baseball savant page and seeing he has really, really high spin and he's got these nasty breaking balls and everybody's saying like, oh man, this guy is a breakout waiting to happen. And my response is kind of like, well, if you actually watch him pitch consistently, you would understand pretty well why the breakout hasn't fully happened yet, and why it's not just as simple as a few arsenal tweaks. It's a whole, it's mechanics, it's mental stuff, it's stuff that's a little less easy to project on than I think a lot of people think. So I kind of had to laugh and be like, all right, let's take a pause and see if he can get through the fifth inning more than like twice in a row before we start taking that next level. I still think he's good. I still think he's going to be very good, but I'm pumping the brakes a tiny bit on some of the rhetoric I've seen this offseason.
Absolutely. And I think you can kind of compare it to like when a front office knows more about a player than everybody else in the league. And yes, there's all the great things that you see, but also, as Sox fans, like we know more than the general community because they're not seeing every Dylan Cease start. We have the luxury of knowing all the quirks about him. And I think just looking at his August to October, it seems like he was becoming more consistent with his release point. It seemed, especially, like he has some of the composure. I really loved what we saw in game 3. It wasn't perfect. He still had some of the Dylan Cease moments, but it just feels like he is truly maturing. And that's why I feel like it's coming there. So maybe still knowing everything I know, he does have that ability to blow up. But I think as, we all progress and we all, mature, especially with Ethan Katz, it just feels like maybe with getting away from the Don Cooper method of pitching, I think that it is maybe going to be there for him this season because he has 3 pitches and those 3 pitches, even on Savant, like it's in an elite tier. So I just think that in watching everything, if he's able to not have those Dylan Cease starts, like you said, the ones where, by the 5th inning, he already has 90 pitches, I think he can put himself into contention this year for the AL Cy Young.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all there. It's not a matter of, not seeing the potential there. It's always been there. It's what we've been dreaming on since day one. It's that seeing 50, 60 starts into his career, the reason he has some of these issues is, when he gets a runner on base after an error, his mechanics get disconnected. He starts mentally rushing things. You can see it. He's not a big dude. He's like 6'2", 190, something like that. And it's really, really hard to sit 97, 98 miles an hour when you are that size. He has violent mechanics. He has a big head jerk. He really has to do a lot and go pretty high effort to get to that level of velocity. And so my take is more coming from the side of looking at that and saying, okay, making the adjustment that's going to give him better control, that's going to let him not have those innings and those games where he just completely loses feel of where the ball is going. He led the league in wild pitches last year. He was up there and hit by pitches too. I think that's an adjustment that is easier said than done in his case in particular. It's not quite as simple as someone like Robbie Ray or even Lucas Giolito, where he was really truly all over the place at all times and kind of came up with that one size. I mean, he did a total overhaul and it fixed him. Right. And I'm not sure if I see that with Cease. That being said, if it does happen, and there is if not a great chance, definitely a substantial enough chance, probably more so than it would have been 5 years ago, that he does put it together, then he'll be one of the top 10 pitchers in baseball. I think there are going back to, I think I said on a couple podcasts last winter, one of my hotter takes is that his stuff at, full speed is better than Kopech's, in my opinion. There aren't too many pitchers out there who have an arsenal that can conceivably compete with someone like Garrett Coles or Jacob deGrom. And he's one of the few guys that can. There's like maybe a 10% chance he gets there, but if he does get there, it's going to come together really quickly and it's going to be pretty incredible to watch. I'm just like a little less sure that it's going to happen than I might have been a year ago. Yeah,
absolutely. But the reason why I love, just your work is the way that you can articulate all of that. And it is great to have, I guess, somebody else besides me, because, you being able to be like the wild pitch thing, the hit batters thing, really love that. But something that stuck out was the size and the mechanics thing. That kind of screamed Tim Lincecum in a way. When we obviously saw, the peak that he was able to reach, but we also saw how quickly his career declined. I mean, is that a worry to you, even though Cease so far hasn't shown injury concerns?
I don't think so, because with Lincecum specifically, it was a really clear cause and effect where it wasn't just the violence in his motion, it was his hips fell apart. That's what, kind of contributed to his velocity drop really quickly. And when he stopped throwing in the mid 90s, he was done fairly quickly after that. And you looked at his motion and he was like almost jumping off the mound. He had an incredibly long stride and you could see like, oh, it makes sense why his lower half kept getting hurt and why his career really fell off like that. I don't really have those concerns so much with Cease. I don't really know what his training regimen is like. Obviously, I don't. He's been outside of his Tommy John surgery. He's been pretty healthy for most of his career. I think it's just kind of a give and take where if he wants to have that 97, 98 mile an hour stuff, he's got to put in a kind of a level of effort that makes the precision necessary to have plus control or even average control really, really hard to get at. I mean, he's look at his windup and he goes 0 to 100 pretty quickly. It's not someone like Jack Leiter, number 2 overall pick in the draft last year, is a guy who's also not huge, but he's always moving and he's getting to his velocity in a slightly different way, I guess. And so with Cease, it's not so much an injury concern as it is the way he gets to his stuff is kind of puts an artificial ceiling on how well he'll be able to use it. I think. Granted, I'm not a pitching coach. Like I don't see this stuff as up close as a lot of the team does. Obviously, I'm not too much of an authority, but it's pretty intuitive in his case, I think.
Locked On White Sox fans, it feels like every time I'm talking to you, I am talking to you about Built Bar's best tasting bar, the Puffs. They are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. They're a treat. And that's because they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And they're also a treat because the flavors, in my opinion, are to die for. You go to the website, you can see banana cream pie, cinnamon churro, coconut marshmallow, mint marshmallow, ruby chocolate, and lemon dipped cheesecake. Again, I'm telling you, these flavors are to die for. My favorite thing, you can go to built.com, you can check the macros chart, and you'll see that they are high in protein and low in calorie. They're high in fiber and low in carb. These flavors are to die for, and Built Bar, that's what they focus on. They focus on the taste. They make it delicious first, and then they figure out how to make it healthy. So you will be making a great choice in changing this out to be your go-to treat, because again, they are healthy and they taste delicious. Go and try them out. Go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 at built.com for 15% off your order. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. I went over to my grandpa's for lunch. I mentioned, hey, Grandpa, my windshields aren't working the way I want them to. So he pops the hood. I bring the car around back. He pops the hood and he sees the wire that's sending all the fluid to the sprayers to get the windshield wet, the windshield wipers wet. So it wasn't pumping out, and he cuts the wires and he tries sucking it out, and he ends up, getting windshield wiper fluid into his mouth because he was trying to figure the problem. He figured out the problem was the pump because it wasn't pumping through the cords that were working, the wires that were working. I'm not a car guy. This is why I take it to my 70-year-old grandpa, but he says, go get a windshield wiper pump. And it took forever for the guy at my local auto parts store to even search for the part. So let's go to rockauto.com and I will show you how quick and easy it is to save money using rockauto.com. Rockauto.com, because I told you, I just needed to get a windshield wiper pump, and I told you I'm better at computers than some other people. So I'm just going to type in my car, Toyota Corolla. We'll go down here, see 1.8. That's what I need. And then so I see wiper pump. I'll even just type in water windshield washer pump. Look at this, $11.55. And I paid $30. Boom, it's that easy. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so you know we sent you. They have an amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. You talked about the stuff, though, and comparing it to Dylan Cease and Michael Kopeck. I also agree with your take that his stuff is better than Kopeck, but I just like Kopech's, obviously his build, better. I like his size. He just seems like a horse, like a stallion that's, ready to go 200 innings at some point in his career. But with Cease, I've always loved this stat. You look at the spin on his fastball, the spin on his slider, the spin on his curve, and we're going into the savant talk that you were talking about that started this whole tweet. But you look at that, and the only guys that compare are Corbin Burns, the former Cy Young that played for the Dodgers and Reds and Cleveland team, Walker Buehler, and
he
Dylan
faked
Cease.
His way to those numbers,
right? And then he's using sticky stuff on that. So it is truly an elite class that he's put himself in. But with Kopeck, are you concerned about, what's 2022 look like in your mind for Kopeck?
I'm supremely confident in Kopeck. Even though I like Cease's stuff at like full potential, assuming they both hit their ceilings, Kopeck, he's not someone that has to give max effort to get to that velocity. He's got really beautiful, clean mechanics. The only question you have with Kopeck is that we know he's only going to be able to give you, maybe 100, 110 innings next year, realistically, maybe up to 125. So it's more a question of how they're going to use him. And is he going to be able to get through an order 3 times? Is he going to have is his curveball or his changeup going to emerge as the third pitch you usually need to succeed at the major league level? I mean, there's a chance, a much better chance than is true for most, that his fastball slider combo are just so good that he can pull like a DeGrom or what Carlos Rodon was this past year and really just throw those 2 pitches 90% of the time. But most guys aren't that good. And I think it would be kind of foolish to assume that that's going to be the case. So there are questions about Kopeck, but you look at the mechanics and you look at what his performance was that last year, and there just don't seem to be too many holes in his profile right now. So I think we can talk about PECOTA in a minute, but there's a reason that PECOTA loves him and the eye test loves him. And, if he stays healthy and can pitch every 6th or 7th day, I think there's as good of a chance as any we'll see an all-star campaign out of him.
Let's get into the PECOTA things first, because I think maybe the discussion about how he fits into the rotation, what the rotation looks like in 2022 might be, a little bit longer of a discussion, because we talked about that on Monday and I went 40 minutes by myself. So, there's a lot of stuff to get into there. But why do you think PECOTA loves Michael Kopeck? And I know that there's some players that I thought they were down on Luis Robert. What's your general take on the Sox PECOTA projections going into 2022?
Oh man, it's hard to not be excited because they're projected for 94 wins. I wrote this up for South Side Sox last week. They're projected for 94 wins, which is 10 more than they've ever been projected for by PECOTA ever. It's kind of, famous Sox fans hate it because it always hates the Sox. It's never, for going back to 15 years, it projected them for 80 games in 2005, and the rest is history. They've never broken 83 projected wins, and now they're projecting them to be the clear-cut best team in the Central, one of the 3 or so best teams in the American League, and that's with gaping holes in right field and second base and the back end of the rotation. So it's pretty optimistic, even if like some of the individual numbers it gives might kind of be a little confusing, but it's a really good look right now.
Like overall, I think I agree with you. I projected them 93 wins. I thought they could go 93 and 69, and they went 93 and 69, tooting my own horn. Who doesn't love doing that? But 94 would make sense for this team, 95, 96. I wouldn't be shocked by that. Even if, injuries derail them, especially with the rotation, if they stick at 90, I think they'll still win the division. But where did they kind of miss, in your opinion? Because I think they missed with Robert. Do you think they missed with any specific players, and where could that 94 turn into 97 or, hell, even 100 if things go really right?
Yeah, so I think the system is really low on Andrew Vaughn right now, and it's easy to see why, because all it has to go on is past performance. And for Vaughn, we have nothing but 55 games in A-ball and then a really up and down rookie season. And it kind of highlights what the projection systems, their flaw is obviously going to be that they can't see adjustments and they can't see scouting. Vaughn has got a really nice swing. He's got a really nice approach. He hits the ball hard as hell. And he is only a few relatively reasonable adjustments away from, tapping into that 30, 35 homer power. And for somebody who went, again, pretty much straight to the major leagues from the Pac-12 with about, 200 at-bats and then a bunch of alt-site stuff in 2020, I don't think you can look too down on his rookie year. But of course, PECOTA doesn't really know any of that. PECOTA sees a guy who had middling power in his one, stretch in A-ball, and then went to the major leagues and was pretty and didn't really stand out in any way. So it's pretty lukewarm on him and thinks he's going to be a little bit above average at best. And for all the reasons I just said, I think that's going to undersell his potential pretty strongly. He was, for a time, for 6 to 8 weeks or so in the middle of the summer, the best hitter in the lineup for a little while. He got hurt late in the year, and I don't think anyone is going to give him any problems for taking 2 months to adjust to the majors. Again, after having not really seen professional pitching all that much less major league pitching. So that's definitely a big miss for sure. I'm a little higher on Gavin Sheets than it is. It still sees a, big slugging, beefy corner position role with not a lot of defense and no base running. I think the power is more real there than it's going to give him credit for, because I can't see adjustments. He did make a big swing change in 2021, which can pretty visibly we can see pretty visibly how that led to, having more homers last year than he did his entire minor league career up to that point. He still can't hit lefties. He's still a platoon guy, but I think it's being a little bearish on him. Other than that, it's hard to really complain all that much. I think it's pretty reasonable. Even when players have not good projections, people are going to be low on, or not going to be super happy with Luis's projection. It's a lot lower probably than people think on the offensive side. Eloy is a little bit lower than you would anticipate, but both of those things have pretty clear reasons from the standpoint of how these systems work, and they don't really mean that the upside isn't there. So there's not a lot to be unhappy about in these numbers.
BetOnline.net is now the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network and of Locked On White Sox. Football might be over for the season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. BetOnline has the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to even odds on where the next fired coach is going to land. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. I got to tell you, this past Saturday, my sports watching was enhanced by using BetOnline.net. I like their college basketball lines. I like their NHL lines. I was watching Colorado versus New York. Why was I watching that? Because I had Colorado, favored by a goal and a half, right? And 50 seconds left. They only have a 1-goal lead. New York has an empty net. The puck goes all the way to the other end, and Colorado just taps it in. It was the most exciting goal I've ever seen in my life because I won money, and you can go win money at betonline.net. Head to the website today, use your mobile device or use your desktop. Again, betonline.net. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. Locked On MLB Prospects is brought to you by host Lindsey Crosby. He is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Are you more worried about Andrew Vaughn playing 130 games? He played 127 last year, or Michael Kopeck hitting 150 innings?
Ooh, what do you mean by worried?
Which one sounds like more of a reach? Maybe like looking at the way Vaughn broke down at the end of the year, just because he hasn't played over 100 games in any baseball season in his life, especially at a professional level. And then with Kopeck, he hasn't hit 100 innings since I think 2018, and that was like 124. His max was like 138 or something like that. So which one do you think is more of a reach? Kopeck going to 150 with all of his starts and relief appearances, or however they implement him, or Vaughn reaching 130 games? He played 127 last year. Do you think he can repeat that workload again, or, is it Kopeck stretching out?
Yeah, I'm not super concerned about Vaughn and his potential to stay on the field. I mean, another thing that I didn't just mention about him is that fielding in the major leagues is hard. And he got told, 2 days before opening day that he was going to be playing a position that he had literally never played in his life. And I think that there's a reason that catchers, for example, the bar for them on offense is so much lower. It's because defense is hard, and we have to focus on defense. It does take away from your hitting. So between that and the fact that we're not coming off the weird 60-game COVID season, which really messed with everybody's legs, particularly leg injuries were way up across the league last year, as we saw with all of our guys. So I'm not super concerned about Vaughn's durability at this point. Kopeck hitting 150 innings, I don't see. Maybe if they stretch him out well enough that he can make starts for them in the playoffs and pitch into the playoffs for them, maybe it'll happen then, but I really don't see a world in which he hits 150 regular season innings. I just don't think he's going to make that many starts. And even if he does, I don't see him averaging 5 innings a start over 30 starts, put it that way. Maybe 20 starts, but that's a stretch. Yeah.
Right. I guess it's just looking at the way we was looking at the rotation on Monday, and looking at the way Tony used his rotation. I mean, he rode them so hard. Top 5 innings for starters last year. I think they're at 855 plus as a total group. I just think it's tough to see, how they're actually going to roll this rotation out day to day. If Rodon's not coming back, Kopeck takes that spot. It seems like Keuchel's staying in the Keuchel spot.
Reynaldo Lopez obviously gives them length. How do you see the rotation playing out? And we were trying to answer the question, like, if you are saying the Sox need to add more starting pitching, how do they implement another starting pitcher into the group of guys they have and, within the 26-man roster limit?
I think for all intents and purposes, you almost have to take Cease and Kopeck almost as one starter, or like 1.5 starters between the two of them. I think if you get 250, 275 innings between the two of them, it's a pretty big success. And I wouldn't be surprised if we got significantly less. Right now, if there's another bad thing to look at the Pakoda projections, is that it has Ronaldo and Jonathan Stever and Jimmy Lambert projected for a total of 24 starts with an ERA around 475, 480. It's still got Keuchel making 30 starts and reaching that 160 inning threshold that will lock in his contract for another year, which I 99 times out of 100, I'm very much against any kind of option manipulation on the part of teams or anything like that. But you know it, I know it, everybody knows it. We can't have Dallas Keuchel back on the South Side in 2023. We just can't. So in terms of how the actual cardinal number of starters, yeah, maybe we have 6 or 7 starters and there's not an open spot per se. But you look at it from an inning standpoint, is that right now they're projected to win 94 games while getting 50 starts of basically 50, 60 starts of complete replacement level pitching is what, Prospectus is projecting with those 3 in Keuchel. So I think if you want to be serious about competing in the American League and not just coasting to another AL Central title and going 3 and out in the playoffs, you have to add to that. You can't be satisfied with 60 starts of 475, 485 ERA ball in the back half of your rotation, or else you're going to end up leaning on Giolito and Lynn to do more than they need to do. And we saw how that wound up at the end of last season. So additions need to be made, put it that way. You can't count on Cease and Kopeck to give you enough volume to make up for what you're going to miss by losing Carlos.
This is from @PineTarKeyboard on Twitter. Front office needs to step on gas now, separate from Pack, or stay comfortable losing an ALDS. No half measures. In my mind, that's Carlos Rodon staying on the South Side. How do you feel about that? And if not that, when they need to add to this team, I mean, what are the ideal acquisitions in your mind?
Man, I'm going to be really upset if they don't find a way to bring Carlos back into the fold. The situation there is the convergence of circumstances is too much to pass up. You already have the incumbent advantage where he's familiar with the organization. There's obviously a history of success there, based on everything we know. The relationship he has with the organization is good because of his injury history, which I'm not really worried about based on what his mechanics look like now. He's going to get less money than someone of his caliber probably would otherwise. The White Sox, again, should have the incumbent advantage, even if they didn't extend the qualifying offer to him. I don't think you're going to get a better, as much as I hate talking about price and budget when it's not my money, and I think they should all just spend freely, you're not going to get a better bang for your buck than bringing back Carlos on really whatever deal he's going to be comfortable with. I think you got to shell out that money unless, I don't see a lot of similar upside that's a realistic option for the team and that's not going to run them $150 million. Robbie Ray and Gossman are already off the market. It's kind of, I don't want to say Rodon or bust. I don't have the list of free agents in front of me, so there's probably some guys I'm forgetting, but it's just the fact that he is probably the best pitcher left on the market and that they should have a big step up on retaining him is what makes it particularly critical, because we know, we're going to regret it if he ends up pitching for the Yankees in October. I'll say that much.
I agree with you there. And I think the other best arm would be like Kershaw. And it's like, do you want to kick those tires?
And if he's going to the Dodgers or retiring, it's
or the Rangers. I've heard that too, going back to his hometown Rangers.
Right. He's a Texas. Did you know that he played with Matthew Stafford growing up, by the way? This is a White Sox podcast. It's whatever.
But it fits because they were on the White Sox in Little League.
That's true. That was a great picture that surfaced a few weeks ago. Yeah.
So, and then like Tyler Anderson's a name out there, Michael Pineda, UC Kikuchi, Danny Duffy. But like the argument is like, first off, I'm reminded of the Sox when Paul Konerko hit the free agent market after 2005. Like the Sox signed him for, pretty much dirt cheap just compared to the market. Like he got a somewhat fair value, but he still got a hometown discount. Like in a way, it feels like you're still getting a hometown discount with Rodon, because I think, like you said, you're still getting an ace or ace level stuff in that package. And you know that much about him. You have that relationship built up. You're not going to get a player that has 2 top 50 pitches and run value right now. So no, I agree with you too, just with the way the market has played out. Final thing I want to talk to you about, final Sox things, I guess. I was introduced to you by your work on Liam Hendriks in about August when he was breaking down. You wrote about his PECOTA projections. How do you view his 2021 and his value to the Sox at this point?
I don't think there's much to think about. He's projected to be the best reliever in baseball for like the 4th straight year. He had some fluky home run issues last year, and some of them came at the end of games. And if you take away those like 5 or 6 bad pitches or good swings, even if you really take away the Field of Dreams game alone, he had one of the best relief seasons like ever in recent memory. You can't fake the kind of stuff he has or the results he gets. He's going to be, until we see the velocity fall off or he gets hurt or some combination thereof, I don't think there's any reason to think he's not going to be worth every penny of his contract. Relievers are always going to be vulnerable to having their numbers swing with home runs because they throw so few innings. All it takes is 1 or 2 bad pitches and 1 or 2 bad outings to totally tank your stats. So, maybe you look at some of Hendriks' numbers and be like, oh, he blew this many saves or he did this, or like find something else to worry about. If you're there's other spots in the bullpen that are going to be more worth thinking about. I don't think we're going to have any reason to fear a 9th inning lead.
Right. So, and with that, and I'm not trying to set you up here, but going into the scouting realm back in 2020, this was the scouting report on a player from Mike Shirley. If he pitches the 9th inning, how about that for a good floor? Is that a good floor for Garrett Crochet? I know that he was in the red flags part of PECOTA. You drafted him to be a starter. 2 years out now, we haven't seen him start a game. 60 innings total in his MLB career. No minor league experience. Very little experience pitching in Tennessee. Do you expect his future having starting pitching, being worked in, or do you just see him as now his ceiling, honestly, is that elite level 9th inning guy that's worth every penny, just like Liam Hendriks, or is it, gadget left-hander at this point?
Yeah, there are so many variables with him that we just don't know about because there's not much of a track record. I would love to see him start just because I think it would be really dumb to waste that high of a draft pick on someone who you're not even going to give a chance to start. I'm not confident the Sox are going to do that. The law of inertia is about keeping him in the pen. It seems like Tony likes having him in the pen, or someone in the front office does, because they didn't even give him a chance to stretch out really this past year. And that doesn't make me very happy. His numbers overall were pretty good last year, but there's a little bit of a lot of caution thrown into that. He didn't break 100 miles an hour once, which was kind of where we saw that we all started dreaming on that Hendriks-esque ceiling when he came up to the majors in 2020 looking like an Aroldis Chapman clone, mechanically and in terms of arsenal. He really did look very, very similar. And he wasn't healthy for a lot of 2021, and he kind of lost feel for his slider. It was a few different pitches over the course of the year. And his numbers look good, but he had a 4.30 ERA after the middle of June at some point. I don't really know if he starts throwing 101 miles an hour again, then yeah, the roof is the ceiling, as we like to say. He can be one of the best relievers in baseball, but it's hard to throw that hard. You have to stay healthy. And even, the list of players who have maintained that level of velocity for multiple years without getting hurt pretty much starts and ends with Aroldis Chapman. So I think I said this in the article. I want to see them at least give him a shot to develop as a starter, because at this point, I'm not convinced the upside as a reliever is any more than we love Matt Thornton. He was great, very solid reliever, but it's going to be a pretty bad miss on a high first round draft pick in a window of contention. If Crochet ends up being like your fourth best reliever.
Right. And it seems like the window's now at this point. He's had enough experience at the major league level. I think opening day, it might be smart to start him even aggressively down in AA. Just let him keep him away from that Charlotte ballpark completely, put him in a place where, all he has to do is focus on, learning how to pitch to these guys. And build up his confidence by, no fluky home runs or whatever. Maybe that's the best idea, because if this window is open to 2027, when is he going to be a starter at any point in those? It really feels like you got to hit, start building up that now. I want to talk to you now about the lockout. You're very, 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 very smart guy. And that is mostly because you're Irish, big Irish guy here. My grandma listens to every podcast. So the fact that your name is Zach Hayes, she's in love with you right now. We'll share my favorite fun fact about you in a little bit, but very smart. You wrote about why the commissioner position has never been neutral and never will be. What are your thoughts on the lockout, and what are your thoughts on that commissioner and how he's handled the lockout so far?
Yeah, my thoughts have remained pretty steady from day one. I've been pretty strongly of the opinion that games are going to be missed because the owners and Manfred from day one have kind of telegraphed that breaking the union was their goal. The union is fed up and insubordinate. They've been on the receiving end of 20 years of disadvantageous CBAs. And going back to the beginning of 2020, we remember how contentious the negotiations over what the shortened season was going to look like were, and prorated pay and all that stuff. So there's a reason this was telegraphed really, really heavily into the future. And, we are all getting up in arms over the way that Manfred is operating, the audacity that he kind of just lies to our face with and puts out all these incredibly disingenuous statements. And yeah, that's just the logical conclusion of what the commissioner is supposed to be. I think in the post-strike years, I'm 26. I don't remember the strike at all. All I know is quote unquote labor peace. And I think there's sort of a mistaken or at least misguided impression amongst most fans who don't really know the kind of labor politics of the sport and sports in general, is that the commissioner is supposed to be there for the good of the game. He's supposed to keep everybody in check. He's supposed to be fair and neutral and balanced. And even if you say he quote unquote works for the owners, which is a pretty common admission these days and has been for a few years now, then there's still kind of the idea that he's supposed to be a mediator. The commissioner is supposed to have everyone's interest in mind, because if, we know the owners are going to run things into the ground if we give them their way. So, but that's just not true. And it never has been. The idea of the commissioner not just working for the owners, but working against players, very aggressively against players, is something that I think we need to wrap our heads around a little bit more and start saying okay, why are we giving this guy all that power? Why do we have this role that is, when things get tough, when you have moments like these in labor negotiations where players need to stand up for their rights? That's what, it's how labor works. You need a power sharing structure that's not going to be run by someone who is dedicated to breaking unions. And that's what the job comes down to at the end of the day.
Right. And I think it's funny that you mentioned that, his job is a mediator, yet the MLB is asking for third party mediation. And I think that's why the players are finding that laughable, because it's you're just not doing your job, Rob Manfred, which, I love exposing. I'm fine with exposing Rob Manfred on that on that point.
Yeah. And what I talk about in the article is going back and looking at Commissioner Landis, the very first commissioner, who was a pretty despicable human being on just about every level imaginable. And there's kind of the popular narrative that you get is that the Black Sox happened and there was this gambling problem. And so then you needed the commissioner to restore balance to the force and, make sure everything was acceptable in the eyes of the public. But you kind of look at it in practice, and from day one, the commissioner was about suppressing player rights. Landis's the second thing he did after banning the Black Sox was to suspend Babe Ruth because he had decided to barnstorm after the season, as many players did back then. The commissioner has always been about striking down players whenever they have the temerity to try to take a bigger slice of the pie. And there's a lot of that takes form in a lot of different ways, whether it's barnstorming, whether it's players throwing games 100 years ago, or whether it's players saying, hey, you're getting all this TV money now, we need a minimum salary increase, like stat. It's been the entire time, it's been the commissioner's job to say, no, you stay in your place. So I think the sooner that we really start treating the position of commissioner like abstractly like that, the better. And, in a perverted way, it's kind of almost good that Manfred has dropped all pretense of being neutral and trying to save face. He's just like lying to her face very, very smugly. And the easier it is to call that out, the easier we can change public perception.
Zach, it just takes one thing. It's one thing to happen, and then they'll reach labor peace. That's what he told me, is that he's done this for a very long time, and the one thing that needs to happen is February 28th in his mind, and that's the deadline, and that's when they think those players are going to crumble. Mm-hmm. So what are you expecting? If not 162, are you expecting baseball in April still?
I don't know about April. I think it's the answer to that question, whoever you ask, is going to have a pretty linear correlation to how strong you think the players union is going to be. Right. It's hard to say because the union in recent years has never really been able to push the owners even close to a point where they might consider making serious concessions. We don't really know. We don't know how much the owners are willing to lose. We don't know what their economics look like because they won't open the books. So I think it's optimistic to think the players will make it more than a month or so of missed games before discontent starts to bubble up and you kind of have to make a deal. If I had to put a date on it, I would say like first couple of weeks of May is when we might expect baseball. But I also I think the players have probably been pretty well prepared to miss games for some time now. And the mystery is really who's going to blink first after that. And we don't know. We have no way of knowing who that's going to be. But yeah, I think the 28th is kind of the date that we've been moving towards this entire time. MLB knew it this entire time. And this is when the real negotiations are beginning. Not even now, once games are concretely being missed, it becomes that waiting game. So yeah, you're totally right there.
That's Zach Hayes. You can find him on Twitter at Pine Tar Keyboard, which is also a great app, by the way. Shout out to that one. That's a good brain up there for coming up with that one.
Real dumb story. I was really bad at using sticky substances in college. That's all I'll say.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. And one of my favorite facts that I got to mention, because my grandma listens every day. If you are Irish, my grandma immediately loves you. She is from the I think west side of Ireland. And the fact that you are a Gaelic Park trophy winner. Can you explain what you won to my grandma and all our listeners here on this Friday?
Oh yes, to all of the very much invested listeners. I, at the fresh age of 7, had the honor of placing second runner-up in the 2003 Gaelic Park Irish Fest Red Hair Contest. I may not have a soul, but I'm winning prizes for it. So yeah, that's those are my Irish bona fides right there.
Everything I remember from Gaelic Park Fest was going every single year and getting some sort of basketball. Playing one of the booth things and either taking home like a North Carolina basketball, a WWE basketball, like a Bugs Bunny basketball. Like I don't remember why, but I was always winning that prize.
Yeah, it's whatever. It's the South Side Irish equivalent of county fair, one of those types of things.
Absolutely. Zach, thank you so much for your work. Again, you can find him at South Side Sox. That's where he wrote about Pakoda Projections. You can find him at PitcherList. That's where I was on at Shaggin Flies, their podcast over there. And you can find his work at Baseball Prospectus, where he wrote about the commissioner and I think informed you guys, very well about, what the commissioner is actually there for. Zach, anything else you want to plug? Anything you got coming up, any articles you're working on, anything you want to close with?
Oh man, just never forget that Jerry Reinsdorf is stealing your money in a million different ways. Whenever you think about labor in baseball and even the way the White Sox management conducts itself, just remember that Jerry Reinsdorf is taking your money and not investing any of it in the team. So keep the keep pressing him, never be satisfied with, can never criticize him enough as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. You look at the Pirates, they've been spending like it's 2004 since 2004. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. Our next episode will be on Monday. It's a Monday mailbag. You can call 312-566-8727 or write in lockedonsox@gmail.com. Go give Zach a follow at Pine Tar Keyboard. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sully. Zach, you got to call him Sully. Brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. For Zach Hayes, I'm Sean Anderson. Thanks for listening to Locked On Sox.